a solo entrepreneur. And when you hear the term leadership, you're like, nah, not me. I don't lead anybody. Did you ever think that maybe when you're not thinking about leadership for yourself, that's what's hurting your business? Hi, I'm Christine Rothdeutsch, and I am host of Make It Click. And today we're talking leadership. Leadership really for the solo entrepreneur because, well, like I said, you're probably thinking that leadership isn't important. And I'm happy to have with me my guest, Monica Latainen. Did I get that right? I hope I
You
did.
got it perfectly right.
Monica is a mindset coach and trainer. And okay, so like we could go on forever talking about mindset, since that's a new area for myself also. But we don't want to go on and go on tangents. Today we're here talking about leadership because in one of our conversations, Monica, you said to me, leadership is not a title. And I'm like, ooh, that's catchy. Maybe you ought to write a book about that. I don't know.
I have a feeling there might be a few books out there about that, but yes.
But yeah, we often think of, we hear leadership and it's like, well, I'm a leader, or I'm not a leader. But as you said, it's not a title.
Right.
So let's get into this, Monica. Let's get into, if it's not a title, what do we need to know?
Yeah. Well, the thing about leadership is I think, I'm really what I focus on a lot is self-leadership, right? Like how are we projecting ourselves into the world? And really what that means is how are we influencing the people that we communicate with when we stand up and do a presentation, when we're on this podcast? Leadership really is influence, right? And when we're influencing people, we're doing that in a large or small way, in a positive or a negative way, and we're doing that consciously or unconsciously. And I think, one of the most important things we can do, especially for solo entrepreneurs out there, as I am myself and you are, is like being conscious about the energy that we project and the influence that we're having on those around us.
So we have to consciously be thinking about, like you say, how we're presenting ourselves, how we're speaking, and that is being a leader of ourselves because we don't have somebody, a boss behind us telling us, hey, this is how you need to present yourself.
Right.
Nobody's telling you any of this, so we have to be very conscious of this. Something you talk about is let's get into the brain a little bit, okay? And that you say it's wired for judgment.
Yeah. And this goes back to our evolutionary history, hunter-gatherer days, right? We didn't know if we heard a rustling in the bush, if it was going to be an innocent bird or a saber-toothed tiger that was going to jump out and have us for dinner, right? So the brain is always thinking, how does the brain keep us alive? So we are wired to look for what's wrong, whether it's someone else that we're looking at, ourselves, the situation. And this has, been well established in research. And so I think one of the things that we can do is say consciously, well, I know I'm going to look for what's wrong. So of course I'm picking out what's negative. How can I then create an intention that I'm going to say, no, I know my brain's wired that way for a reason, but I'm not in a life-threatening situation right now. So how do I think about and put more of a positive spin or more of an opportunity spin, or what can I learn from every situation versus what's wrong?
Well, and I guess that in some situations that assessment might come like after we did a presentation, or maybe we just went to a networking event and we're walking out saying, oh Jesus, I really screwed that one up.
Mhm.
You know, rather than going that route, switch it around to really take a look at, instead of going the negative route. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, and there's a couple different right, so there's different ways to kinda look at this, and I think, like, the example you just gave, if we're coming out of a situation where maybe we were standing up in front of people and we're like, "Oh gosh, how did I come across?" One thing we can do is say, "Well, instead of beating myself up about it, I'm gonna see if there's somebody I can solicit for feedback." As a matter of fact, when I do presentations, I try to always have someone who supports me in the audience to give me honest external feedback about how I landed with people, and constructive feedback. And I expect them to be, give me at least one or two things, if not more, that I could do better next time. So sort of looking at it like I want to get better. And when I want to get better at things, I really want to be open to honest and constructive feedback and not just having someone make me feel good. And the other thing is, I think, to tell ourselves, if we don't have that other person there to give us honest feedback, or we don't have a survey coming in, is to say, gosh, I did the best I could in that moment. And I brought my best energy forward. And if there's something that we notice about ourselves that maybe like, oh gosh, you know what, come to think of it, I was a little maybe more stressed than I would have been. But now that I think about it, I didn't allow enough time to get there. I was running late, so I was a little more stressed. Or I didn't take a few minutes to kind of do some deep breathing and kind of get centered and become mindful. There's always things that we can learn from every situation. And as long as we can recognize that and say, how can I take this information and get better? I think, and take the focus off of what I did wrong and I'm such an idiot, that can actually help us have a more, positive mindset, and of course use that information to improve in the future.
Yeah, it's something that we really have to work hard at. It's like you say, it's
Yes,
so ingrained in us to go the other route. But you have to ask yourself, is that serving me? Is that
exactly.
helping me in any way to keep going down that rabbit hole? Uh, as we
That's the
also
question
call
right there. Is it serving me? Is this really helpful right now to beat myself up about this? And we think, because think about it, no one, a young, if we think of ourselves almost like as a little child, right? Like, would
them.
we ever say to a child who comes up to us, like, whether we're a parent or a friend, and a child says, gosh, I did a horrible job on this thing I did at school, or got a bad grade on it. Would we ever say, come on, you idiot, do better next time? We would never do that. But of course, the way we talk to ourselves is how we would
Mhm.
never talk to a child or a friend. And one of the tools that gets employed in a training framework that I use called positive intelligence is to actually picture yourself as a child, as a little 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-old, and imagine yourself like, what would you say to that younger version of you now, looking back, like, hey, you know what, you did your best, and okay, so certain things didn't go well, but that's part of being a human being. We're all going to make mistakes throughout life, and it's not about whether or not we make a mistake, because we know we'll make multiple mistakes, but what do we do with them
Mhm.
afterwards, and how do we learn?
Yeah, yeah. And as you bring that up about thinking of ourselves as a child, that's another area. This is coming up more and more in areas because when you talk about writing content, and that's total other subject, write that a fifth grader would understand it. So in multiple areas of our life, we have to keep looking back and putting ourselves in that childlike state, I guess. Um,
Yeah, yeah, and the way it's sort of framed in positive intelligence is like when we can imagine ourselves. Now, this isn't always easy because many of us have had difficult childhoods or may have had difficult things come up. But if we can kind of remember that our true essence is this pure and innocent person before like we kind of went through life and had these things happen to us, and we learned to shut off part of ourselves, or we learned to put armor up. If we can remember that really underneath it all, we're this sort of innocent little beautiful perfect being, all of us, I think it can help us to talk a little more kindly to ourselves, which is really important to learn things, because no one responds well, like we said earlier, to bullying.
Right. And then along with that aspect of there's this part of us that keeps dredging up our old beliefs.
Hmm.
And this is another area that you talk about reassessing our old beliefs.
Yeah.
And that we can change them. That's the neat thing. People think,
Yes.
well, that's just the way it is. But no, we have the capability to shift those old beliefs.
100%. And I think that's where sort of this whole, I sometimes call myself a self-awareness coach too. And I say that because I'm always working on my own self-awareness. We don't ever arrive there, right?
Mhm.
Self-awareness is a journey. We're always seeing new blind spots and reassessing old beliefs if we're conscious of it, right? So I think it's really about creating an intention to say, you know what, gosh, is that framework that I'm seeing this particular situation through over and over again, where gosh, is that working for me, right? Like you said, is it serving me? Is it helpful
Mhm.
to me? And a lot of times we're just not conscious of it because it's just rote, it's automatic, it's how we react, it's what we do. But taking the time to sort of slow down, step back, reassess, look at
Mhm.
things from a bigger perspective can really help us to say, and maybe it's not throwing out the belief, but maybe it's just fine tuning it a little bit. But maybe sometimes it is throwing it out and replacing it with something new that will work better for us going forward.
Yeah, I like that. It's kind of like something that I talk about, your path and just, altering your path. slightly, when you look, because
Mhm.
people are like, okay, so fine, what do I do with this old belief? It's like, what do I do? It's like, it's making adjustments, it's taking another path, just tweaking it instead of getting stuck in that rut, of thinking you can't change it.
And it's very human to do that, by the way. So it's important not to judge ourselves when we get, oh, there's my dog in the background. It's important to know that it's human to kind of want to understand things and to, we sort of resist change as human beings. We like to know what to expect the way things are. But think about it. The environment is constantly changing. Our lives are
Mhm.
constantly changing. The world is always changing. So if we feel like we stay the same, then we're not adapting to our environment and sort of what's going on around us. And that's going to leave us at a disadvantage compared to those that are conscious about adapting, making changes, and fine tuning things in their lives.
Mhm. And as we're fine tuning, then we get into our boundaries,
Mm,
keeping
yes.
our boundaries. What what can you help our audience with on this? Now this not an hour long show, so again, it's like
Yeah, could
let's
be,
touch
right?
on this. Let's pique the audience's curiosity about boundaries. Um,
Yeah, I've always been so fascinated about boundaries because for whatever reason, and at least in my career and in work, I've been pretty good at recognizing when people are stepping on my boundaries or not. My dog is sneezing in the background, sorry. And I don't know if you could hear that, but at any rate, what's important to think about for people and there's so many wonderful, hardworking people out in the world that like to say yes to things because they want to be helpful. They want to be a team player, whether it's in their families or their work. And it can be really hard to say no. There's a lot of clients I work with in that situation. And the thing that I encourage them to think about, before they say yes, because the automatic is yes. And these are the people that, again, make the world go round, is to say, gosh, wait, let me think about this. Yep. I know my typical reaction is to say yes, because I like to be a team player. I like to help, or I want to serve this person or be of help. But at the same time, does this really work for me? And just pausing for a minute and thinking about that. So if we're not constantly assessing what works for us and what doesn't work for us, when we say yes to one thing, we're saying no to something else. And often we're saying no to ourselves and potentially something really important to us, like our family time or friend time or downtime that we all need to recharge.
So on the flip side of that, how does that then correlate to the person who might be asking you things? What should they maybe be taking a look at from their end?
Yeah, that's a really great point. And because I sort of tend to be someone who thinks, well, I'm just going to ask and they'll tell me no if it doesn't work for them. But then some people struggle to say no, right? So I have a lot of people in my life like this, and they're people I, greatly care about. And so a lot of times I'll say to them, like, oh, wait a minute. Okay, I asked you this thing, but does that really work for you? Are you sure that works for you? So I had to become conscious about not stepping on other people's boundaries or
Mhm.
unintentionally having them feel like they had to say yes when maybe it didn't really work for them. So I think being conscious on both sides of it, not stepping on other people's boundaries, being really thoughtful about that person and paying attention to different attributes of their personality. If it's somebody new that you've met, or recognizing their patterns, if it's someone that you know well, and really checking in and saying, does this work for you? Because if it doesn't work for you, then it doesn't work for me. And let's talk about a way to make it work for both of us. Again,
Mhm.
that sort of we versus me thing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's, we have to be thinking of the other people around us because, I mean, we all know people who think the world revolves around them.
Mhm.
But, is it how, I wonder how it's working for them. Uh, but
Yeah.
so, Monica, this has been a lot of information for our audience. How can you take this and wrap it up in a nice bow? Like, 3 tips. Can you outline that for our audience?
Sure, sure. I think the first step, and again, this is a continual journey, as far as understanding who we are, just like self-awareness is. So sort of knowing who we are, knowing our values, knowing our priorities, what's important to us, and then constantly assessing our strengths and weaknesses, like acknowledging our strengths and then saying, okay, these are areas I struggle with a little bit. How can I work on and improve those? When we're able to sort of understand and be responsible for those strengths and weaknesses, we come across as much more sincere and trustworthy and are able to connect with people more easily. So that would be the first one. It's kind of a mouthful.
Mhm.
The second one is just remembering that energy is contagious. So Intentionally thinking about, like, am I complaining about something? A lot of times people are like, oh, they don't even think about it. It's a way to connect, but they say, oh, it's a terrible day out, or it's so hot, or it's so sticky. And there's nothing wrong with that. But thinking, if I'm meeting someone for the first time, or I'm being introduced to a new group, what kind of energy do I want to project? And being really super mindful about that. Again, thinking about, am I being positive or negative? Am I influencing in a powerful or a minimal way? And am I being conscious or unconscious about sort of what's coming out of my mouth? So again, being really aware that energy is contagious. And then lastly, I would say sort of, if the more that we can be flexible and open to change and learning in our environment that's constantly changing around us, the more prepared we're going to be to sort of handle the challenges that will continue to come up, the things that we can't see around the bend, or the things that might be going on right now in our life. So to stay flexible, I say, flexible, open, and curious is sort of, three things I try to tell myself when I'm struggling or having a difficult day.
I will start saying that to myself. Flexible, open, and curious. That's thank you for that one. I appreciate that. This has been a wonderful conversation about really, I guess, self leadership. Solopreneurs really thinking about how they are presenting themselves, how they're coming across, and everything. If one of our listeners would like to learn more, or or even have a conversation with you, do you have something to offer to the audience?
I do. I was going to say, if anybody wants to reach out, I have a link. I think you're going to put it in the chat, but it's ctcoach.link, and that will lead you to a form on my website. And anyone who wants to reach out as a result of seeing this podcast, I will provide a free assessment. I'm going to give you a couple choices: a values assessment or a saboteur assessment, understanding some of your strengths and weaknesses. But if you reach out to that link and fill out a form and put "make it click" in the subject, I'd be happy to offer a complimentary assessment.
Awesome. And then your website also is chartingthecourse.net. If you don't want the assessment, you just want to learn more about Monica, just go to chartingthecourse.net. So Monica, again, this has been a wonderful conversation, but we're not quite done yet. And I didn't mention this beforehand, and don't panic. But this is the part of the show where I ask my guest about their own business and about something that they can think that they feel has just helped them to make it click in their business. Maybe it's something that you learned about being a business owner. Maybe it's the way you're operating. But when I say, Monica, what helped you to make it click in your business? Does anything come to mind?
Yeah, and this kind of ties back to, I mentioned values assessment, but kind of like understanding my own values. One thing that's really important for me is to have fun in day-to-day life and have fun doing what I do. That helps me to keep my energy positive and contagious in a positive way. So I like to take every opportunity to enjoy what I'm doing, be fully present. And I think when I let go of sort of this pressure of like, how many clients do I have and what am I doing on social media? And I just said, what's fun for me? What do I enjoy doing? I enjoy talking to people. I enjoy connecting with people, presenting, things like that. Things settled in a little more nicely and started to click more naturally.
Oh, awesome. Well, I hope that you've had fun on Make It Click today. Thank you